Hey, you're listening to After the Session. My name is Christian Cummings. I'm chilling in the room here with my buddy Patrick Heaney.
Patrick Heaney.
Yeah. Do you have an Instagram account, Patrick?
At Patrick Heaney. That's it. I'm simple man with simple needs.
I'm at Christian.m.Cummings.
So many dots.
I know. I couldn't get anything closer to my name without adding the dots and the M. This is the final episode of Season 0 with Michael Beinhorn. Producer, musician Michael Beinhorn. I'm a huge fan of his work and have been for perpetuity since the beginning of me listening to music. Michael's worked with Soundgarden, Mew, Hole, Marilyn Manson, Chili Peppers, the Bronx, Social Distortion, Ozzy. You can Google him for his website. I don't have that info in front of me. But he's just an incredible guy. And me and my buddy Dan Bailey, who you know, who's the drummer for Father John Misty, we both drove up to LA and recorded this entire episode at the Village. And it was awesome. It was it's a little long, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, I think. But we go into a ton of topics, and it turned out great. I should state, though, this is prior to Chris Cornell's passing, so that's not a topic on the podcast. But we did talk about his book, which is really good, available on Amazon, and it turned out fantastic. After the session, a conversation with Michael Beinhorn. Check it out. Michael Beinhorn.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming to hang out and donating your time to this project. How are you doing?
I'm terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
How are you?
I think we're good.
Good.
I came up here with my pal Dan Bailey, and I think our commute might have been like
Dan.
We set some sort of record
The
getting
fastest.
up here. Dan's a session drummer. I brought him along today he was kind enough to come along today to just kind of provide the musical kind of sidekick.
Nothing going on. One, you know.
Well, for a change, you just flew in yesterday, right?
Yeah.
From a big tour. But thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm a huge fan.
Thank you.
Certainly a bunch of your work has been very instrumental in my musical growth over the years. And just thought we'd get together and bullshit about whatever we want to. Are you working on any projects right now?
I am in the process of seeing a book that I've written to completion.
Okay.
Which has been a labor of love over the past 3.5 years. I've been able to work on it intermittently while I've done other stuff. And happily it's finished. And I guess it has a street or publishing date. I don't know what they call those things anymore.
Yeah.
June 23rd. So I'm excited about that.
What's it called?
It's called Unlocking Creativity, A Producer's Guide to Making Art and Music.
Whoa.
It's published by Hal Leonard.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. I will be in line waiting to buy that on Amazon. If there's a line on, I'll be in a virtual line on Amazon to purchase that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, can we talk about the book real quick? Because I wasn't aware of that.
Absolutely.
Obviously, the title's pretty self-explanatory. Can you kind of maybe give us a general synopsis of the book or what
I'd be
you touch
happy
on?
to.
Okay.
Well, the germination of the book was that I've been a keen observer of what's going on in the creative community.
Uh-huh.
As it pertains to, music, popular music. And I've written about it. I have a blog that I've been, that I've written about this kind of thing. And it occurred to me that there are books that people have written about record production, and they all focus, generally speaking, on the technical aspects of making a record.
Yeah.
Which are very, very important. Having that specific focus completely misses a lot of things that I think are crucial in the record production process.
That's so funny. You say that. I one of the goals of the podcast is I'm not trying to avoid talking about gear on the podcast. And obviously it's podcast focused around music producers and recording engineers, but the importance of focusing on the art of making music is sometimes lost in our conversation and dialogue.
Well, I I love recording equipment as much as anyone else does, although I can't do a damn thing with a computer. Well, sort of. I like that Reason program a lot. It's fun.
Yeah.
But like, to me, like the hardware is like the fun part of it. But still, you know, I think that I do feel to a great extent that the technique of record production has really supplanted the art of record production. And there have been no definitive statements about what that actually is. For that matter, what a description of the job of record production really is. Because when you see a lot of books that tell you a compressor does this, and this is a good compressor, an equalizer does this. You need a microphone preamp if you're going to use a condenser microphone.
Yeah.
And these are some good ones. And here's a setting I like.
Yeah.
You know, which people are going to spend their $20 on. But if that becomes the focus of what is essentially an art form, you really kind of lose the guts of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you lose the art of it. These are tools. That's all they are. And tools in the hand of a genius is going to that's going to create a condition of genius, of great stuff. The output of that, when it's applied to really talented people, it's going to be brilliance.
Right.
However, the very same tools in the hand of a moron who's talentless is going to yield shit.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so it's, you know, people are sold this kind of like bill of goods of like, oh, wow, if I use the same settings as so-and-so and the same, you know, equipment as so-and-so, you know, I mean, it's like I need big drums to get like that John Bonham sound. I mean, what's that John Bonham sound anyway? It's like, well, first you need John Bonham. You know, he happened to be one of those guys who, I mean, he tuned his drums a certain way, but really he could sit down at any drum kit and make it sound like John Bonham.
Yeah, he's going to sound like John Bonham.
All you got to do is be good enough to set the mics up in the right way to capture that.
Yeah.
You know?
Like get out of the way, kind of.
And you, well, he'd make you get out of the way. It's a big fella.
Yeah.
And I just started to write down these kind of protocols, like things that I kind of applied to my own process, you know, and stuff that I would kind of work with artists to achieve, and, you know, things that would help their ability to do their job optimally, you know, like kind of monitoring them in a way, like watching them over the course of like the day, seeing what their, you know, what their blood sugar is like when's the guy starting to fade and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And knowing like, all right, you need to eat. You know, it's really funny because if you don't say things like that to people, you know what happens.
Right.
Blood sugar is a tremendous impediment to getting good work done.
Right.
You know,
that's kind of a crazy thought that like one of the very important tasks of your day-to-day operation is making sure that people are fed, and like that is a very important part of record producing. That's kind of funny.
It seems, yeah, and it seems
I mean,
silly, but it's like you don't know how many people I've had to like say, "When's the last time you ate?" And they'd be like, yesterday. You know,
artists tend to forget to eat too.
Yeah, like your voice is failing because your body is starting to fall apart because you didn't put food in it. It's not being fueled.
Yeah.
You know, but it started with things like that. And then it began to go deeper and deeper into actual methodology, which I realized as I was writing, I've never seen anyone write this down. And wow, I wish that I'd had this on a lot of recordings that I did. And I began to kind of apply a lot of experiential stuff, like recollections of projects that I'd worked on. And I didn't want to turn it into a kind of like, when I worked with, you know, so-and-so of such and such, you know, and one day they said to me, wow, this is great. And I said, I know. And that was really good because we spoke and I talked to him. You know, I just wanted to make it as general as possible and not really, you know, dwell on that aspect of things, because to me, I think being able to kind of like illustrate a methodology, like the way I might work, for example, could potentially jog someone else.
Right.
You know, like for example, when you're dealing with a person's music and you're in the stage prior to actually recording it in pre-production, you know, and you're listening to it and you're thinking to yourself, what the hell is this person going on about? Or what does this mean? Or, you know, is this real? Or this is amazing? Or, wow, that transition going from this section to that section just sucks, you know, but I know how to make it better. You know, all these little, all these many elements, but to try and like break them down and categorize them and really demonstrate them in a way for someone to look at them and to not only employ what I might have written down, but to allow that in itself to be an exercise to maybe jog their thought process into going like, I might think this when I listen to a piece of music, or I might think that, or, something else might come up. How do I feel when I listen to this piece of music,
Right.
And using that as like a barometer to detect if you feel that something that an artist is doing is well, if you want to use like values, good or bad.
Good or bad, yeah. It's all,
and like
it's hard to define good or bad, but yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, because like it really, to me, good or bad registers as a sensory thing.
Right.
It doesn't register as an intellectual judgment.
Okay.
And that's, I think, if you take this from the perspective of we're using our intuition to judge things, the intuitive is a sensory apparatus. It's not an intellectual apparatus at all. I've been working like this my entire life.
Yeah, your instinct is a big part of it. Yeah.
It's, well, from my perspective, it's the whole part of it.
Right.
Any decision, and there might be an exception here, an exception there, but I would say most of the decisions that I would make in the creative arena would be solely intuitive, down to like equipment.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's weird because like I get a sensory response to like pieces of gear.
Yeah, something excites you or it doesn't excite you. It's you get an emotional response from a microphone selection, or
I would look at a signal chain and go like, this is what's going to work.
Okay.
And it would be based on, I don't know why, that just feels right.
Okay.
For a guitar, like, and it's weird because like in my mind, it's kind of like, it just sort of draws a picture for me, and it's like, okay, it's going to go that way.
Cool.
It's
very
weird.
Instinctual for you.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that I don't have formal training doing this, so
you don't. I didn't know that.
No, I got no.
Reading
training.
your resume, it seems like you kind of came from a place of education or some sort of.
I faked my way.
Yeah. Well, hey, that goes back to Dan and I, our conversation on the drive up about winging it, but
no one ever has any idea what they're doing. Yeah.
Well, but the fact is that no one does.
Yeah.
I've heard people say some of the most inane things imaginable, like people who are incredibly successful, and people who you would expect, wow, this guy's got to be a genius.
He's got it all figured out. He knows exactly where he's going,
and this guy will drop a bomb of knowledge. And you'll just be standing there going like, am I missing something, or is that possibly the stupidest thing I've ever heard anyone say? Like, I don't know how this guy got here. And then I look at myself and go, oh, wait, who am I to speak?
Yeah. Wait, am I doing the same thing? Yeah.
How did I get here?
That's funny, man.
But I also wanted to kind of include a little bit of, I guess, experiential, philosophy as well. Like I guess essays that might illustrate and drive some of the points that I was making home a bit more.
Okay. Wow. Well,
it's different. Like,
no, I believe that's an important way to approach the conversation, man. I'm not coming from a place of your experience, but producing.
Do you produce records? By the way?
Yeah. Producing an artist is not necessarily the most logical process, right? It is very emotionally charged, and that for me specifically, my initial instincts whenever I hear something or have a feeling of, I make a specific note in my head about that. The very first listening, the very first impression I get from something, a part, a section, a solo, whatever, just that's it.
Yeah,
that has to be the right answer. That's, if it's good or bad at that moment, then I'm always referencing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
As soon as I start thinking about it, it's messed up.
But it depends, because you can also find yourself being influenced by other stuff too. Like, to me, a lot of it is first listen, and a lot of it is also cross-reference. I'm not saying conscious either, because what I experience over the course of a day, it's all sensory information, and it can all be interpreted as such.
Okay.
You know, anything can happen to you over the course of the day that you can sort of like cross-reference against something if you choose to look at all things that you're encountering as abstract information. You know, so the experience alone can affect or jog something inside of you, like something that you might not have come across before. You know, so a lot of times I will be kind of in in like stasis or whatever over something that I cannot like sort out for the life of me. And then I'll just trip over something, you know.
So it's like, oh, wow.
Over the course of, it's crazy.
Discovery, yeah.
Because you don't know where the aha moment, I don't like to use that term much because it's oft used, but you know, you don't know where it's going to come from. And that's one of the cool things about it. I mean, that's one reason why it's fun to employ like time and pressure to a recording, because you really, I find that I've been able to get like really terrific results that way.
Is that something you do pretty often in your process? Like you say, hey, I've got time and pressure, where you say, oh, we got to have this done by then. And I'm sure it's different for everybody, but.
Well, no, I mean, I only work under, I mean, like having enough time to actually kind of like deal with all the potential creative stuff that might come up. I mean, really, that's kind of helped a lot of records along that I've worked on that weren't quite where they needed to be. And that's, you know, it's been very interesting. I find that rushing people along is very constraining, actually.
Okay.
You know, I know that there are a lot of people who like to work very fast. I actually love working fast. You know, the only problem is that I guess my version of fast is different than other people's.
Well, Pro Tools in digital recording has kind of changed the process a little bit from, you know, how it was prior to being able to just hit a button and be right back to a spot in the song. And you can't necessarily, you're not spending time rewinding tape or queuing up things or stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
So that changes the speed at which people expect things to happen. So.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt.
Do you still record in analog?
No, I haven't done that for a while. I'd say the main reason is probably budgetary. Although even if I had the opportunity to, I would probably turn toward DSD.
Oh, really?
Instead of analog tape. I mean, I love analog tape, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, I know of your super analog, your 8-track 2-inch machine that you have, or is it just one of them or a couple of them?
I had a pair. I don't have them anymore. One was actually a 16-track machine that had the 8-track heads on it.
Okay, cool.
But the problem with that is that if you don't have a recording studio and it's sitting in storage, which mine eventually were, you also have to apply tremendous amount of maintenance time to those things because they will break down on you like crazy.
And that's the last thing you need in the middle of a session, right?
It happened too many times.
Yeah.
The first time I broke one of those machines out, I'd actually purchased it, had the heads built, and I had it shipped, the system shipped to Paris, France to start a recording cold. I had no idea what this thing was going to do.
Okay.
You know, it was just kind of like on a whim. I was like, I know this is going to be
this
great.
This is going to be great.
I hope it wasn't stupid of me.
What kind of machine was it? What were the 8-tracks?
It was a Studer. They were both Studer 800s, but they were Mark 1s.
Okay.
And the reason why...
Highly modified once you're done with them, obviously.
Well, not the electronics. The only thing that was... The only things that were modified in the machine was... There was a time code reading device that was retrofitted into the system. It was PAW. I don't remember what that stands for. PAW. And I think it was the only system at the time that would convert the Studer, the SMPTE code into like Studer machine code so it would run the machine. And what the guy who built the heads, John French, who is sadly deceased.
JRF.
Yeah.
Right.
What he did, which was, I mean, I felt like I was pretty darn clever coming up with this idea, like, wow, 2-inch 8-track, you know, make him bigger and fuller and more low end and everything. You know, but John actually, I think, you know, he was the innovator because he said, I've got an idea, because you'd have to give up one of those analog tracks for time code.
Right.
He built the head stacks with a center track
Okay.
between 4 and 5 that had rails on it on either side that was specifically for SMPTE. So it was this teeny little track,
Brilliant.
and there was no
Tiny little bit of real estate just for the SMPTE.
tiny little real estate, but it was insulated from the audio tracks.
Okay.
Whereas if it had been an audio track, if there was a transient, and obviously you're going to use a machine like that for drums first,
Right,
which is all the transients in the world.
Yeah.
The transients are going to like knock into your SMPTE and cause the machine to lose lock. So having these the insulation around the guide track meant that it was completely impervious to any bumping.
Especially, I mean, you got to have 2 of them probably to do what you want to do.
You don't, but I
You gotta
had
have
to.
two 8 tracks.
After I heard the way this thing sounded, I was like, I have to get another one of these.
Can you? Would you fit an entire drum kit on one machine, or would you spread it across a couple of machines, or how did you? Different all the time.
When I heard what this machine, I got the Mark I because it's 2 speeds, but they're not 15 and 30. They're 15 and 7.5.
Whoa. Okay.
Yep.
So were you working at 15?
Nope.
7.5?
Hell yeah.
That takes a lot of guts, Dan. It does.
Yeah.
Once you,
Well, I don't know. Maybe on this
heard,
machine, maybe not. I don't know.
Seriously, once you've heard a machine like that with tracks that are like that big, I was told that these were the biggest audio tracks on any multi-track machine ever.
I could see that for sure.
Once you've heard a machine record and reproduce, program drums in a big room with like subwoofers in the room to amplify the drums at 7.5 EPs.
It's just
a
monstrous.
Studer, no less.
Yeah,
like an 800, which to me is that's my favorite tape machine ever built.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you.
I think I just added to my bucket list.
Yeah.
At some point.
I mean,
Do you get
everyone in the room who heard this when it was, when it was finally playing back was just like,
holy shit?
Absolutely in awe.
Yeah. So you would get frequencies way down there for sure.
We had to obviously limit the 2 mix. And the engineer I was working with, Paul Northfield, he preferred a pair of 1176 LNs across. He didn't like that as much as the. Actually, I think he used it with the SSL compressor.
Yeah.
But we had to hit the signal. We had to hit the 2 mix really hard because if we didn't, we would have destroyed our monitors.
Yeah.
Because the transient response, but the low frequency response was so extraordinary that we'd be playing back music on a pair of NS10s.
Yeah.
And people would come in and go like, wow, that's really good. Where's your subwoofer though?
Yeah.
You could hear straight down like probably below 60, 50 hertz out of a pair of small near field.
Just
crazy.
Just for listeners and for you, Dan, if you don't know this, the slower the tape machine goes, the more what's the best way to explain it? The low frequency response is extended,
right?
And then you have maybe a lower head bump as well, right?
It's even amplified.
Yeah.
And when I saw the graph that came with the frequency response graph that came with the head stack, Fletcher from Mercenary Audio, who kind of worked with me on the project and introduced me to John.
Yes, I've met him. He's a character.
He's terrific.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, but look at the high frequency response at 15. I was like, but look at the high frequency response at 7.5. And he's like, well, it's tapering off. And I was like, yeah, but like,
I don't care.
The low frequency response is insane. I don't care.
Kick drum for days, Dan. Kick drum for days.
If I'm moving, anything that I'm losing in high frequencies, I can get back just by rolling in high frequencies. Because anything that you lose in the lows, you're not going to be able to get that back at all, no matter how much low frequencies you want to roll in. But the highs, if they were recorded, you can always amplify that. Yeah. Even air that may not show up. I mean, if it's somewhere in like a a graph like that, you'll be able to dial it in.
Were you using like Dolby with this or no?
No, non-Dolby.
Just hit it hard. You got plenty of real estate.
You couldn't really hit it that hard.
Really?
You couldn't hit it. I just made a lot of discoveries with this because it's sort of...
Yeah, you were kind of paving the way on that.
It was funny, yeah.
But now it's gone. It's gone. Well, times change and things have to evolve. And so are you working in Pro Tools now?
I'm reluctantly. Yeah, I think I might go back to Nuendo. I don't know. I don't know if I'm feeling Pro Tools. I like Native better, obviously, but I don't know. Again, if I had the budget to work with, it would be DSD.
So I was saying earlier that we don't really get into gear too much on the podcast, but I want to ask you some gear questions now. You kind of got my gear wheel turning. So obviously the tape was a big part of your process, and now you're moving forward from that.
I only did it on 2 records, though.
Oh yeah,
it was only on 2 records. I did an Ozzy Osbourne record and a Social Distortion record, and unfortunately, the way they were mixed, it doesn't really give you the full length and breadth of what the machines can do. So I wasn't very. I didn't think that they gave a really good showing, but it also.
I could see a mastering engineer getting in there and saying,
the mix down wasn't that great. It wasn't the mastering engineer so much. Like, it just, I think it really demonstrated to me that, like, again, you can have all the best of intentions at the creative stage of the project, but they can be thwarted anywhere along the way by someone who, I think someone, well, I'm not going to say
didn't share the vision you had maybe at the moment.
Exactly, yeah.
See the same thing. How do you keep so focused and persistent and not... and battle those things so consistently from the beginning of your, maybe the recording process to the finished record, where you're just battling against hurdles and problems and things that could potentially derail you? Is there like is it just
you mean
focus?
Like technical things?
Technical things, personality things, any kind of hurdles. Like how do you? I'm trying to think of the best way to even frame this question.
Well, those are different. Each one of those are different questions. Like personalities and individuals is, that's one.
It's a whole nother conversation.
That's one aspect of this process. Technical stuff is another. If you're talking specifically about sonics, and
I guess I'm asking more about mindset. Like, it seems to me that the more I speak to guys that I admire, like such as yourself, about their process, they all have the same mindset of, no, everything matters. And I am going to strive for not letting not losing too many battles as much as I can from the beginning to the end. You may make compromises, but you learn where to make those compromises. And really, it seems like a lot of these amazing producers that I've met, or recording engineers, they just work really hard at not allowing things to squeak through that are mediocre. How's that? Is that an apt description of maybe your mindset?
I think so. I think what you're speaking of really references having an overall vision for the project, like seeing an image in your mind of what that is, and recognizing that it's your job, it's your duty on the project to maintain what that vision is. Now, you can't really share that with anyone else, not even the artist on the project, because they can't see what you see in your mind. And as a producer, over time, you start to find that image is, every time you get near the music, every time you get near the process of working on this particular project, it becomes more and more clear. At the same time, you have to be flexible enough and able enough to be able to
evolve,
to kind of like turn on a dime if the process wants to go anywhere else. See, the thing is, as a producer, my job is essentially to preserve what I'm getting from somewhere else. This is information that I'm not like formulating on my own. I always feel like I'm being guided.
Okay.
I don't believe that this is like, me and my ego trying to speak through this process at all.
Right.
If I did, I think that it would be a far less satisfying thing to do.
Endeavor, yeah.
I have an image in my mind, which, you can't, when you say image, you can't really define what that is.
Absolutely.
It could look like
that? Yeah.
It could look like a building. It could look like something on a horizon.
Right.
You could call it any number of things, but it's something that I see constantly while I'm working, and I can't really shake it. And it has an emotional resonance to it.
Do you establish that vision like really early on, like right out of the gate?
Yeah.
Is it pretty obvious to you right out of the gate?
It's generally really obvious, and usually it happens better if there is something already emotionally compelling about the artist's work. sometimes there isn't something specifically emotionally compelling about the artist's work, but there is a sense of potential about what the artist can be, what they're going to turn into. And a lot of times I'll try and find a way to be able to articulate that to the artist so that they can at least get some insight into what I'm seeing and what I would like to try and capture.
Right.
I can't always say, we're going to do it this way. I mean, although sometimes I will, and I'll draw diagrams for them and try and illustrate it the best way I can.
Right.
But it's a really nebulous, really abstract principle. And, to me, like, the whole process really a lot of it winds up taking place in the abstract. Like, I found myself trying to get sounds. Like, I like to use synthesizers for a lot of stuff, to process instruments and things. And, have you ever mess around with that? Like, analog synths?
Starting
just
to
kinda,
more, yeah.
Ooh, it's fun, man. It is.
It seems like a rabbit hole you can go.
It's a
really
rabbit
deep
hole,
in.
but if you have the right stuff, and
Yeah.
if you get used to the tactile aspect of it and what this does, if you kind of move that a little bit that way,
That tactile thing is a big part of that experience.
so much
Yeah.
fun.
Turning a real knob.
It's so much
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, knobs are so important.
Yeah.
But like,
There's a joke there somewhere.
yeah, I knew. I know.
We'll just go right by. It's too easy.
Yeah, it's too easy. Thank you for not taking the opportunity.
Well, I kind of did, I guess.
but like I find myself in situations where I'm getting a tone or getting a sound or something like that, and my brain's just gone. It's not there at all.
Right.
My brain's
It's not in a way.
functioning, but I have an innate sense of what it is that I'm doing. I don't feel at that point that I'm necessarily like in control of what's happening.
Right.
And I don't want to be in control, because if I try and enforce my sense of like, well, I got to be running this, then it turns into shit. And all of a sudden something that could be coming from someplace else that's going to be a million times better than anything I could come up with what minimal intellect I've been blessed with.
Dan, do you find as a drummer, like as an experienced drummer, do you find that like the more you're thinking about what you're doing,
Oh yeah,
it gets in the way,
I always
right?
find it's if you're trying to get drum sounds or something, I'm always very aware when it's not right. Like it might be, you'll put a snare drum up and like, nope, that's not the drum for this room or this sound or this, whatever the part is.
Right.
But yeah, you have to kind of get out of your own way and kind of like let it happen.
Yeah, as soon as you're mindful of what's happening, then you're kind of out of the experience.
Talking with the producer and the engineer, the artist, that we want this kind of thing, and then like when you find it, if you just have to be open to let yourself find it, like if I go, you know what, that's my favorite snare drum, that's going to be the drum on this track, then I'm already shooting myself in the foot, and it may be totally awful, or it may be great, but not where the producer and the artist want it to be.
Right. A lot of less experienced drummers than yourself I see struggling, that maybe I run into, that are struggling with, say, playing to a click track. One of the biggest issues they have is actually thinking about the click track.
Oh yeah, you just
like listening to the click track. Don't listen to the click track. You got to you got to be on it, but you got to also forget it's there.
Yeah.
Well, where do we pick up from? So we were talking about the tactile function of knobs there, and
also the innate function of trying to find things and letting yourself be guided towards them, which pertains to completely to sensitivity and intuition. Yeah. And again, those are two things that don't have any basis in intellect at all. And for me, if I'm producing a record, those have to be engaged constantly. So I just trying to remain open to whatever is happening in that particular space. And that also goes back to having a vision about something. Now, I can formulate a set number of ways to satisfy what my perception of that vision is. But again, like I was saying before, I have to be ready to turn on a dime in case something else comes into the mix that changes that says, no, you're not gonna go left today, you're gonna make a right. And instead of resting on my laurels and going like, well, damn it, no, I'm going to do what I want to do this time. Right. I've seen how that works, and the outcome is never attractive.
No.
You just you have to let it roll. And it's funny because sometimes it takes you into really scary places. I mean, having worked on records where, for example, like musicians weren't able to cut it,
Sure.
that can be really tough but at the end of the day, you know, in my position, I have to recognize that I was given a specific role to follow.
Yeah.
And I have to do my best to satisfy that, not just for my sake, but for the sake of the project.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of any specific instances that you'd like to talk about that maybe where and you can dodge this if you want?
No.
I'm just throwing it out there. And,
no, I mean, because
yeah.
it's funny because it's something that kind of gets like lobbed on me a lot, you know.
Yeah. I kind of maybe thought that after I obviously was doing a little research before we got together. I was reading your blog and some stuff like that. I mean, that's old news,
okay.
But yeah. You haven't been through that too much, have you? Or is that something you've been through quite a few times?
You know, it's
really
funny
I have no
because
idea.
I know so many guys who've actually made more records than I have, who've done it more and actually would do it as a matter of course.
Yeah.
You know, my attitude has always been like, well, we have to use the person who's in the band.
Of course.
Unless they can't cut it. And then we absolutely have to get someone else.
Right.
On the particular project that a lot of fuss has been made about, which was Hole.
Okay.
You know, I was told beforehand by the band that we will work with you under one condition, that you cannot fire our drummer. And it was funny that was the sole condition that they put to me at the time. And
because they already kind of sensed that this.
Well, because I'd done it on a couple of other records.
Okay.
You know, but at the same time, like, you know, if you look back historically, it's kind of like, well, you know, I did it on a record with Soul Asylum because the drummer ran out of gas after 4 songs.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And we were on a tight deadline, and he had, at that point, he had red light fever. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know, when I work with Soundgarden, I didn't have to do that because Matt Cameron's like a stud.
he's
He's a
monster.
maniac.
He's like
I'm a drummer, and he's like
he's
top 5.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
can you even
He's
imagine?
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so with Hole, I was like, okay.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah,
Matt
man.
Cameron? Does Matt Cameron do rim shots when he plays the snare drum? We were talking about this on the drive up.
A
Do you
good friend
remember?
I
of mine
don't.
who played for the Wallflowers for years did a couple tours with the Wallflowers and Pearl Jam and swears that he doesn't.
Okay.
Which is a feat of
Because that snare drum is the backbeat is so monstrous.
Just the sound he gets out of the drums naturally is pretty fantastic.
He's well schooled. He's just one of those drummers who's like the perfect convergence of everything that you want in a drummer. He's got great feel.
Mm-hmm.
He's got great technique, and he knows how to hit.
Yep.
He knows how to. He also
There you
knows
go.
how to like how to play with the drums.
Mm-hmm.
He understands dynamics.
Yep.
He knows how to extract the tone.
His worst passes are better than so many other people's passes that I, you know, and it's amazing because Matt is a real musician in the sense that when you hear him play, you can really tell the great takes from the bad ones because you can tell that he wasn't focusing.
Right.
You know, you can just hear him on a take that's mediocre and go like, he's not there. His brain's somewhere else. And then when he hits it, it's like, oh my.
That's it.
Well, we're done. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
You know, and he would tear it up. I mean, you know, like I remember, I think we did like when we did Black Hole Sun, he did like 3 or 4 passes on that one. And I just remember when I think the one that we used was like number 2 or number 3. And I was pretty sure. And then when he did that right before chorus 3,
Just
I was
wipe your
kind of
hands,
like,
kind of, okay.
I don't know that he's going to be able to do that a whole lot better. I don't know that it's even humanly possible because the timing was impeccable. It had all this flair and pomp, and it was just kind of like, oh my God, this guy is just strutting. Like it was so exciting. Like I just got this tingling sensation all over
I'm
my
hearing
body.
I'm hearing the fill in that section of the song in my head as we're discussing it. And I'm like,
It's
that's
so
a smoking little
dramatic.
spot. Yeah.
It's so dramatic.
Yeah.
And he totally came up with that fill too. I mean, it was like
Just in the moment?
No. He'd been working on it in rehearsals, and he
Yeah.
did it like, you know, a bunch of other times when we did the other passes. But that was the one. It was just like, oh.
You get asked about that record a lot, I'm guessing.
It happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I in all honesty, that's one of my favorite records of all time.
Cool.
But I'm not going to ask you about it.
Good.
Okay. So
you.
what I want to ask you though is what would be one of the, and again, you can dodge this. What would be one of the most memorable records that you've done that people haven't given enough attention to? Would you say quite a few, or could you just pick one?
Well, I mean, that's got so many
layers
to it. That question,
because you're going to say, okay, well, we're in a different. You've kind of traversed a couple of different time periods in the music business where record sales were in this zone and more people paid attention to this thing. And
well, I mean, a lot of what went on some of the recordings that I did are also things that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
They were very, in hindsight, just fascinating events. I mean, that's sort of a tough one to answer.
Okay.
I mean, I can remember discrete moments in time, which are really personal to me, where I'd be sitting listening to playback at the end of the night, and I just feel like I was being transported someplace else, and I was like, God, I wish I could share this feeling with someone else, but I can't.
Such a magical place to be sitting in the control room by yourself, listening to work you did at the end of the day with no one else around, with whoever it may be, some Soundgarden or Mew or whatever, and having this feeling of, wow, this just happened on my watch, and I'm excited about it. And I feel so proud and kind of like emotionally overwhelmed.
Yeah,
that's cool, man.
I'm so grateful because I've had that experience so many times. And on some records it would happen on a regular basis. Working on that Soundgarden record, it was really tough because those guys didn't really get along so well, and I don't think that we jived all that well either. But at the same time, I'd listen to what we'd do at the end of each day, and I'd be like, oh man, I'd just be like, this is as satisfying as anything I've ever listened to. I'm not going to dare compare it to some of my favorite records.
Yeah.
I think that would be it's not cool.
Yeah.
But I would listen to it and go like, I just am so incredibly fortunate to be in the midst of this right now, to be doing this, and I'm so happy. And I continue to be happy.
Have the opportunity that you created the opportunity for yourself, but you're there and you get to have that experience, and that's a very unique experience to have in the world, in the universe. That is a really unique experience.
It is, but like the biggest part of it for me was that at a certain point, I began to recognize that these statements were things that infiltrated other people's lives and had a profound effect on them emotionally, mentally, even physically in some cases.
Right.
And I was like, what I owe in this case, my responsibility isn't even to the artist, to the project, as a device to be able to reach out to people who are going to listen to this and communicate directly with them. That is my responsibility, and that is what I owe people who have put me in the position to be able to do this.
Okay.
And that's always been my job, and I felt, and I do feel, that I have to do these things for people who are going to hear them, because it has to enrich other people's lives. It has to be something that is for the benefit of others, that can broaden someone's existence.
Right.
Because if I feel that I'm making art, and I would like to think that I am, that is the function. Thank you. But no, that's the function of art. It's there to enrich people's lives. It's there to make their life fuller, more whole, have more depth. For them to also to realize that they're not a bunch of automata running around with these dry, boring functions that have no meaning beyond trying to maintain whatever crappy little bit of real estate they have underneath their feet. There's more to life than this, and that's what art is supposed to show us all.
Right.
Even if that more exists in here, or in here, there's a tremendous spiritual component to the whole thing. I mean, I feel funny using the term, but what the heck?
Oh, it's applicable.
It is. I mean, and living in a secular society, our spirituality is really found most deeply in art. That's where it is, and that's one reason I feel that we have so much difficulty now, because there's less and less of that now. That less and less art is being made that actually has that kind of intense emotional resonance to it.
Right. Why would do you have an opinion on why that might be the case?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of reasons for it, actually. You know,
Do you want to get into that discussion and share some?
It's a fairly long discussion,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, I mean, I think a lot of it pertains to money. I think a lot of it pertains to how the business has taken popular art and co-opted it into something that had a degree of expression to it, and it's now become something that is almost exclusively commoditized.
Okay.
That it's seen exclusively as a commodity, as are all things.
Consumable.
It's consumable, and it also is a signifier for other things. It represents other things.
Okay.
It is devoid of its capacity to be able to communicate the meaning and the intent of the person who created it. It is now a device to be able to apply a sense of reality, or perceived sense of reality, to something else. That doesn't necessarily have to do with it. It's a device. It's an advertising tool. It's no longer something, or it communicates a lifestyle that you can associate with another commodity.
Okay.
And being treated like that. And also, you know, when you look at bands who are, you know, or artists who aren't at the same level as a major label artist, they are being forced into the same mold of having to treat their music exactly the same way. And I'm talking about even indie bands or stuff like that, who have to think, what's my brand? You know, and things like that. And like,
how do I market myself?
How do I market myself? Because they realize, and unfortunately there is some truth to this, that if they don't get some kind of access for themselves, like some way to be able to have people see them, they will not get through, because no one gives a shit, because it's a sea of like millions of people waving their arms around like this, and the person who gets seen is the person who waves their arms a little differently, and maybe has a nice set of boobs. I don't know.
That can't hurt.
No, it can't hurt.
Yeah.
You know, but the thing is like, having thousands and millions of people on Twitter and on wherever, you know, I mean, everyone tries to do it. I'm not immune. Like, I'm on social media too. You know, it's become an inescapable fact of modern living, especially if you need to do something that isn't defined by like inside a 9-to-5 job, a standardized structure of this is how I earn my living. Because otherwise it's like you can be the most talented person in the world sitting in a garret, no one hears your music, and you just kind of die of consumption, and that's the end, you know. And you know, but you know, so you have to, so these are realities that have to be considered as well. But like along the way, the meaning of what music is as a modality in and of itself is completely lost.
Okay.
That's like that's kind of like a short form summary. I mean, it goes a lot deeper. There's like, you know, historically you can see how this has gradually been happening over time.
Do you see any cycling back the other direction at any time in the
I don't believe in cycles.
Okay.
I don't believe in cycles. I think I feel that things happen, that there are natural events and things do repeat. I don't see a repetition of anything in this case.
Okay.
I think that we have hit a hard reset button on the whole thing.
Yeah.
On the creation of music and on the creation of art, we've hit a hard reset button. This is like, I don't know exactly when it was, but this is year one.
Yeah.
You know, whatever happens going forward is going to redefine everything.
The art completely.
Yeah, and I hope it redefines the art before it redefines the business, because everyone is talking about the business and no one is talking about the art at all.
Amen to
it
that.
Is disgusting to me.
I can't. I mean,
man.
Right.
It's fucked. I'm sorry.
No, it's fun.
I get really, really pissed off about this.
The art is at the root of everything you have done, and the projects that you've been on that are my favorite and some that I hold near and dear to myself. The root of what makes that so great is the unpolluted art form that I get at the end of it all. So I absolutely cherish that experience, and I understand where you're coming from, and that feels like it has been polluted in some way, shape, or form on occasion when I'm thinking about it. Because some of your artists, some of your projects, they're coming from a place of complete, I don't give a shit. I'm going to do what I want to do. And they're completely connected with their art form, and then you manage to get that translated onto a piece of recorded media, and I get to enjoy it.
It's like I
that's
said before.
it. I mean, if you can do that, that's like the.
It's an obligation.
Yeah.
To follow that, to try and follow it, because there's so many forces that work against that too, because it's completely antithetical to the way people make records now, right? Mm-hmm. When everything has to be done systematically. Mm-hmm. When the use of Pro Tools is kind of like, the strength of it isn't in the fact that it's a recording device, it's that it's a fact that you can edit things.
It's a repair.
It's I couldn't have. Thank you so much. I couldn't have put very well said.
Yeah.
It's a mechanism to repair people's inability to do their own fucking job.
Okay.
No, seriously.
Right. No, that's cool.
The best records to me are records that were made by people who are working their asses off, trying to get a feeling across, trying to get an idea across, just using every fiber of their being to do this.
Yeah.
If you hear people who aren't trying, and by the way, I have nothing against machine music at all. I think that that it's there, it's valid. There's got to be space for it.
Right.
And
there's some guys doing some brilliant stuff.
Brilliant.
I think.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's just, it doesn't have to be everything, because it's easy to make records like that. There's no overhead involved, and record companies don't spend money on making records anymore anyway.
Yeah.
They're just great big clearinghouses, to kind of to broker deals between their catalog, which is they've rendered completely worthless, and Toyota or someone like this now, or like the the NBA for their halftime shows.
Yeah.
But like, there's a point where people, it's really interesting, because in the middle as artists, we suffer from like 20/20 myopia. It's like really tight tunnel vision.
Yeah,
here.
right.
And then they're the business people. They exist in their own illusory tunnel vision world too, which, by the way, is completely
incompatible.
Asynchronous. Totally asynchronous with ours.
Yeah.
And then you have the audience, who are basically, at this point, I guess they're the ones who are kind of making out the best, certainly because they don't have to pay for what they don't want to pay for. And to a certain extent, I mean, this doesn't sound good, but why the hell should they?
Right.
Now, at the same time, I meet so many people who are not involved in music or recording in any way, shape, or form, who ask me, what the hell is going on? Why is music so shit now?
Yeah.
These are people who are actually concerned about this.
Yeah.
I did this thing last week. Do you know what the Tribeca Disruptive Innovation Awards are?
No, I don't. It sounds cool.
It's connected to the Tribeca Film Festival. Mm-hmm. Like, they have an award ceremony every year for people who are leaders in disruptive innovation, which is
sounds right up my alley, man.
Well, it's interesting because the guy who coined
punk
the term
rock innovation, man.
I wish it was that punk rock.
Yeah.
This guy, Professor Clayton Christensen, who's a brilliant man. I think he's head of business or law at Harvard, and he came up with the concept of disruptive innovation, and he was trying to study the causality of changes that take place in systems that are, generally pertaining to business,
right,
that are kind of like slowing down or performing under par, and then they get hit with like an innovation or something like that. And he was finding that these innovations would seldom come from inside, that they would always be they'd be exterior, from the exterior of that structure, and they would come from like the bottom up. They would come from out of nowhere, and they would essentially completely destroy the fabric of whatever, industry or whatever it was, and completely change it. Obviously not to the benefit of the people in the industry, but to the benefit of people who needed to use or gain access to the, you know, that the particular service or good. You know, I mean, Airbnb is a good example of this, and they actually got an award at this thing on Friday. You know, one thing that was interesting is that this guy is also saying that these principles need to be employed ethically. They need to be they need to be used with care, because there's a lot of throwing the baby out with the bathwater going on.
Right.
And like, you know, progress is cool, moving forward is cool, and hey, I made $1 million is doing this is cool too. But it's like, all right, what's the cost at the other end though? Like, what are you doing that's, you know, that's also potentially going to damage other people and their businesses and their lives? And how do you kind of, you know, replenish the balance, like maintain this, at least
equilibrium,
at least be conscientious of it. And one thing that I noticed was that when they gave out the awards, it was basically a lot of like guys getting up and like this, you know, like,
of course,
I'm a badass, you know, I'm doing this for the good of, you know, the people, and I'm a billionaire too.
Yeah.
What do you think?
P.S.
You know,
I'm a billionaire too. I'm doing this for the people. P.S.
Yeah, that's
making
right.
a shitload of money as well.
That's right. And I'm gonna be hanging out with 3 escorts this evening, all weekend long
For the people.
Yeah, for the people. The people paid for them too.
Yeah, right.
And but when he came out to speak, I mean, he was Christensen. You know, he comes out to speak. He's the only guy who makes sense. You know, and he really kind of addresses the ethics and, you know, talks about where all this came from and stuff. And, you know, everyone's leaving the place talking about who's that old fart up there, you know, like.
Yeah.
But
not giving him the respect maybe he deserved.
What was really interesting is in the midst of all this, like, I had to do a panel on music with a couple of other people, and at the end of it, so many of the people who came up to me were people who were, some of them had nothing to do with music at all, and they were all like, you know, I'm not saying this because I'm so wonderful or something like that, but they said that something that I had said had really kind of jogged something in their minds, and they'd been like, I recognize that that the music is so bad, and I've been wondering if it's just me or why this is happening, and you know, and they were very grateful that someone would actually take the time to make points that, you know, to try and explain to them what exactly is going on.
Right.
You know, and I think that this whole the complaint about this has gone, you know, far from, oh, you're just an old fart, like you don't know anything about like new music and stuff, because I've gotten that a lot too, but a lot less recently.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, do you find that you have to deal with that too?
It seems like, I mean, I'm 33, so I don't feel.
You come from a youthful place of having to buy records.
Yeah. I was probably the last generation to ever record on tape, to buy a CD the day it came out. Like I'm right at that edge. If you're much younger than me, you probably haven't done that.
Yeah.
Because you had Napster and you had, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It seems like the democratic nature of the way you can make music now is both good in that some people that maybe wouldn't have had a shot otherwise get a chance, but also bad that now the good things that are happening are in this sea of mediocrity and getting seen in it. It's like, well, do you make a YouTube video?
How do you elevate yourself above?
How do you recognize like actual transcendent talent now if it's covered in a sea of
fuzz,
boredom, and like
noise
and regurgitation?
If it can if you can make something that stands out though, that really stands out,
right?
See, to me, like, I mean, there was a certain point where I would tell people, you know, there's like a space for people to come along, to make a truly transcendent record that will be an emotional statement, you know, that you could drive a car through. I mean, now, you know, to me, it's like that space is the size of like several like interstate like freeways lined side by side, that you could drive like, you know, a bunch of like jet planes through.
Right.
You know, it's that crazy because no one has come along to make that statement. I mean, to me, and I am always using this as a reference, especially to people who say, oh, the album's dead. You know, there's no needs to make records anymore because the public doesn't give a shit, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Gee, 4 years ago, there was an artist named Adele who sold 22 million records because people resonated with that record. And you know what? It wasn't even that great. you know, but it doesn't matter because what she did as an artist is what an artist is supposed to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's not so much the songs, it's her talent. Her just vocal.
She's a communicator.
Yeah, absolutely.
She spoke to people in a language they understood. She was on a wavelength that anyone could tap into and go, I get this.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
visceral, it's immediate,
Yeah.
it hits you hard. It doesn't matter if the record's bad or if it's good. It says something specific.
Yeah.
And she's the last person to do it. And I would say at this point, she's probably going to be the last person, at least in the next span of time, that's going to be able to sell like double
on that scale. Yeah.
Quadruple platinum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you think the record? Do you think the biz is kind of bottomed out, or
No.
still got a little ways to go before it
little.
gets to the bottom?
At a consistent rate of 20% a year, I don't think we've seen the end by a long shot.
Okay.
They're, the thing is that they're trying to play both sides of the field, and the more data that comes out, the more obvious it is what's going on.
Yeah.
They talk about streaming and they talk about companies like Spotify like they're the devil, but at the same time they each own 3 to 5% of those companies.
Right.
I mean, like if you want to go to war with someone, then go to war with them. If you want to just engage in a bunch of like useless posturing that is just that it is meaningless.
Yeah.
You're just talking out your ass, then you're going to lose credibility. People are starting to see this.
Right. Do you feel that Spotify is the devil?
No. No.
Do you think what they're doing is? Do you feel that it's fair?
Well, I think that's a very
Ethical?
subjective question. From my own perspective, I think that Spotify is basically a bunch of business people who saw an opportunity. And
there's not necessarily at the root of that anything wrong with that, right?
When it pertains to corporate logic and corporations in general, I think that they function by an entirely different set of rules than people do. So to apply ethics or morality to
Isn't that relevant?
Exactly. I don't think there's any relevance to it at all. I feel like a corporation is kind of sort of like a city state or like a kingdom that's got a moat around it, and they all function. They've got their own culture, their own individual corporate speak, their own mission statements, and I think that they're all smart enough to be able to incorporate terms and language that resonate with people like us or people in the public. They've learned the lessons of history as well. They've learned how to navigate around appearing to be monopolistic. So it's harder for the public to look at a company like Google and say, oh shit, that's a monopoly.
Right.
As opposed to like, the muckraking journalists in the late part of like the 19th century who are, pointed at like
Standard
US
Oil.
Steel or Standard Oil. It's like, that's a fucking monopoly.
Yeah.
you guys are killing people with your monopoly, and like got it broken apart.
Yeah.
But like Google are performing a service for the people, no different than Standard Oil, but they framed it in something else, and they're using their media to their best advantage. I feel that they have no ethics. They have no morals to speak
just
of.
amoral.
I think that they're completely amoral.
Yeah.
I think it's, it's
It's not that they lack morals or have morals; they are amoral. It's irrelevant. Yeah,
it's
non-moral.
It's. I think to me, from what I've heard, from what I've gathered, in a lot of cases, it's the equivalent of having sociopaths running things. I think a lot of these guys actually are kind of like that.
Yeah.
They simply don't care, and if you happen to get in their way, it's just like, I have to get there. You're in my way.
Sorry.
Spotify is very interesting because it is a business that's not built on selling a commodity. It's built on using someone else's commodity through their delivery device. It's also interesting because it's a big corporation that has not yet proved how it monetizes.
Right.
Which is really, really interesting.
How can you grow and grow and grow and become such a behemoth? Well, it's happened. It happens actually quite a bit right now, but
But
a lot of corporations.
and so much of
Speculation,
that,
you know?
Amazon.
Yeah.
so much of that is perception.
Yeah.
In fact, it's all perception. It's what we can convince you we are instead of what we really are. Spotify just went for $400 million worth of new funding.
Yeah.
And I know people who've posted, because this is to inflate their value. So
Right.
people are getting all upset. Oh, Spotify's worth $8 billion now. That's worth more than the whole recording industry. How dare they? And it's like, what are you getting so upset about for? A, it means nothing. B, it seems to be that they're angling to do an IPO, that they're trying to inflate for that it doesn't matter how much they're worth. Like, what difference
Yeah.
does it make? But again, perception.
At
Right.
the end of this discussion that we're having right now, it all boils down to, I'm looking at you, Dan, and people you're playing with, and you as a producer, and maybe myself, all being able to sustain ourselves to exist in the capacity of making art for other people. And at the end of this conversation, the bad news is that it's exponentially more difficult right now to do what you love to do and to deliver art to people in the form of music than it was maybe even as recent as 10 years ago.
Yep.
And I think that's the problem with the situation. I mean, obviously I'm kind of simplifying it right now, but it is, I will go forward saying that it is a bummer. And it is sad because because I just recently last week had an experience with a kid who's 26, and I think he's really brilliant, and he was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this anymore because I don't see any future in being able to sustain myself.
Right.
And I have other goals and other things that I'd like to achieve in my life, and this is not compatible with them, whereas maybe a few years ago it would have been.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer.
I come at it from a selfish place of
Yeah.
being a sideman.
Yeah.
That means artists have to tour
Yeah.
constantly to make money. And that means I get to pay my bills with my week rate
Yeah.
when I'm out on tour. So granted, no one's making double scale anymore playing on the record. But the fact is, if you're playing with an artist that likes to be on the road and that's how he's going to promote, like I am, then it's not the worst thing in the world. And so for venues, for booking agencies, for artists, for monitor engineers and front of house engineers, like that world will be there. And actually tickets are selling, at least in the world I'm in, like really well. Because if you play for an artist that you have to go see, there are still a handful of we're talking about St.
You guys-
Vincent.
yeah.
St. Vincent. Just saw her at Coachella. Unfucking believable.
Yeah.
Like seeing her in person is like, I'd pay $45 to see that every year.
Yeah.
Easily. Because she has something. She's got songs, she has performance, and she's doing something with a whole package
Right.
that needs to be seen. So in the touring world, it just means you have to bring something that's worth seeing. You have to have the songs, you have to have the production.
Right.
So from being a touring musician, the studio musician part of me is bummed out.
Yeah.
The touring musician part of me who likes to travel it's not the worst thing in the world, especially when you get to work with artists you really like and enjoy being around, and
Yeah.
you get to see songs. If you're doing 60 dates, you get to see them grow over the 60 dates. And,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
You are playing, I think, as a footnote to that, you're playing with someone who's very artistic. And
I'm
you
playing
have
with
a
someone
really,
who you have to go see.
Yeah. Yeah. You're playing with
Josh Tillman is a force of nature that you have to see
Yeah.
in person.
So you're
I'm very happy to be supportive of
yeah,
that.
you're in a awesome situation right now.
I cannot complain, and he's a great boss.
He's a good
Excellent.
boss.
That's
Very
fantastic.
talented guy.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting kind of towards the end of things here. But is there anything you would like to talk about on the podcast before we?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to answer and perhaps rebut
Okay.
a little bit what you said about it being a bummer. What the
Obviously,
state of
I'm
things.
oversimplifying. I mean, I'm
No,
doing that on purpose.
No, I am not disagreeing with that either. These are egregiously bad times as far as being creative and doing music and recording go. I do feel very strongly though that if the greater community of artists is able to organize, to join together, and to not be divisive or feel divided by these, the forces that be, because we really, so much of us feel that we're at the effect of record companies and this one and that one, and we can't get past these barriers and really kind of look at what there is there. I mean, there is still raw talent that needs to be harnessed. The only thing that's missing from that equation really is how the harnessing goes on. And to me, one of the most important things, one of the most valuable things that's missing from the equation right now is artist development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's crucial, and it's something that no record company has worked or applied to their artists, I would say probably within the past 20, maybe even 30 years. They simply don't do it anymore. It's something that they eliminated. I mean, a lot of these companies fired their most important employees who were actually staff A&R, who were very, very talented, some of them, at what they did, and actually had good ears, could hear an artist and go and know what the capability was, and knew how to talk to them, even if they were the slimy record company guy. There needs to be a resurgence in development, and it's going to be an independent module. It's not going to be something that you can find in a record company. And there are going to be people, myself included, by the way, because that's really where a lot of my focus is going right now.
Right.
Who are going to treat development as something in and of itself to be able to build. But the thing is that it's not just a business undertaking. It's something to help build a stronger artist community so that we have artists, because again, there are so many talented people out there, so many, who aren't getting, even people who are like signed to like big deals, who deserve to have the opportunity not to develop in a way where like I tell you what to do. It's more like, or having the time and like the pressure variance applied to them,
Right.
so that they can grow organically. Like if I push you a little bit and show you something that you're doing or that someone else has done from a perspective you've never taken before, what's that going to do to your perspective on what you do? How's that going to change you? What if that sends you home and makes you write a song that you never even imagined you could write before? These are things that matter. And that stuff like that is what's going to help, is going to help jumpstart the artist community again. I feel very strongly about that. A lot of what I've written about in my book pertains to the artist development as well. I really, really want to try and put as much focus out there on this as being a crucial part of a recording project and a crucial phase in an artist's growth.
Right. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So your book's coming out when again?
June 23rd.
June 23rd, Hal Leonard?
Yeah.
And is it just where's Hal Leonard stuff available? Everywhere, right? Amazon, bookstores, wherever?
Yeah.
Kind of their website, I'm sure.
Their website, yeah.
It's like anywhere books are sold.
Yes, and
I get them all
eventually,
on Amazon personally.
when my website is all fixed up, it'll be available.
Cool. What's your website?
Just michaelbeinhorn.com.
And people can learn about you via the Google.
Yes, it's not quite. Yes, the Google.
The evil Google.
The Goog.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Google's a verb now. It's pretty cool. Well, thanks so much for lending us some of your time. I know you're a busy guy. And,
my pleasure.
We really appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Pleasure. Thank
right,
you.
Thanks a lot.
That was the end. I went back just before I coughed. It fades out.
I know the faded cough.